Oh man, we made it to Batman and Robin, widely considered the worst Batman movie ever made, but also the film most notably known for killing the Batman franchise. This film over time has grown such a reputation that if we ever get a comic book movie that is just bad and terrible, so much so that they need to reboot it years later, they will call that film a Batman and Robin. And you gotta be a special kind of movie to have earned that title that you can go ahead and label it to other films in the future. But in a weird way, I do feel really bad for Batman and Robin, because this was the end of a big era with Batman coming to the big screen, starting all the way back with Tim Burton's Batman, seeing how it's evolved over time, switching out actors, bringing in different Batman characters. Heck, a lot of the reasons that people love Batman today are because of these four films. So let's just go ahead and hit play with the movie that killed the Batman franchise, Batman and Robin of 1997. So at the beginning of Batman and Robin, we are actually treated to two different Batman logos. One that gets turned into ice, pretty cool effect, but then it immediately shifts to a little bit of smoke and red lights, showing off what I actually consider to be the most badass Batman logo ever to exist. You can say whatever you want about Batman and Robin, but speaking as far as logos, you gotta admit, this one looks pretty nice and iconic. With Joel Schumacher back as director this time around, since Batman Forever was a big hit for the studio, there's a lot of things that he does similarly with this opening for Batman and Robin. We get to see them suit up, full butts in our faces, along with a newly upgraded Batmobile since the previous one was exploded by the Riddler. And I'll say, I like this one better than the previous Batmobile, but it's not one of my top Batmobiles thus far. It again just comes off feeling so impractical, especially since, you know, Batman at this point had already agreed to have Robin by his side, so he decided to make a Batmobile that always had two seats, this time just have one seat. No other reason for that happening other than just to be able to give Robin his own vehicle, a motorcycle that comes out of a cool little container.
I want a car. Chicks dig the car.
This is why Superman works alone.
Superman can fly, you dumb mother. But the other big changes that we'll notice here is one, Robin did get a suit upgrade. And I said I love the Robin suit from Batman Forever. I thought it was a good interpretation of the Robin suit from the comics. And here it's obviously inspired by his Nightwing look. And that makes sense because Nightwing was always the representation of Robin becoming his own hero, separating himself from Batman. And this movie does touch upon their budding relationship, that they don't always agree on each other, and Robin kind of growing up. As far as the new Batsuit, I mean, it's just a Batsuit. It looks like the most tasteless version of the previous Batsuits that have come. Not really much style and color to it. It's just an all-black suit with the main change being George Clooney behind the mask. And that's another thing that's sad about Batman and Robin, because I really liked Val Kilmer's version of Batman / Bruce Wayne, but Joel Schumacher and him just apparently did not get along, and Val Kilmer just had no interest to doing another Batman movie. But as Batman and Robin are being called off to meet our new villain of this film, we do get a lingering shot on Alfred that lets us know he's sick. And this Alfred being sick storyline will, I think, prove to be the only redeeming factor of Batman and Robin, but we'll touch upon that more in a sec.
In this universe, there's only one absolute. Everything freezes.
And here's where the biggest problems with Batman and Robin come in, because while I think Batman Forever sure was a downgrade from the first Batman movie and Batman Returns, it still held a decent quality factor where the film at least tried balancing some of the darker Batman themes, with the origin of Robin and Bruce Wayne having to deal with his dual identity, with them even tackling the subject of this version of Batman being a killer and trying to stop Robin from going down that same path. And any dark tone you could have thrown in with Batman is just completely taken away with Batman and Robin, and it turns into a full-on cartoon.
What are you? I'm Batman.
Hi, Freeze. I'm Batman.
And even with these magnificent set pieces that they have set up with Mr. Freeze at this museum, setting up ice crystals everywhere, it just doesn't feel authentic anymore. It doesn't impress the same way the previous set designs of the other Batman films came off. This feels like you're about to walk into a theme park. Like, hats off to them for actually building these sets and trying to be creative with Mr. Freeze and having icicles everywhere. Because we do have here Arnold Schwarzenegger, who plays Mr. Freeze. I am an Arnie fan. I think the man is badass, and pretty cool that they invited him him in here, paying him $25 million for the role. An insane amount of money to pay an actor, even with today's standards. But boy, do they really fumble what could have been an amazing Mr. Freeze storyline. Because as Batman and Robin are kind of tackling the goons of Mr. Freeze here, we get an idea of what his plan is for this movie. His essential goal is to get as many diamonds as he can, not only to power his suit, that I do want to say, I like the Mr. Freeze suit. It's honestly a great design choice. It just sucks that I associate it with it being very silly, having the Puninator be in that suit.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
But Mr. Freeze's goal here of stealing the diamonds of Gotham City to not only power his suit, but also go ahead and find a possible cure for his wife is a storyline and origin of Mr. Freeze that is taken directly from the Batman animated series. There's something crazy with this Batman animated series because it was created and inspired by the Tim Burton version of the Batman films. I'll even say the episodes of that series hold up to this day where an adult can enjoy them because they are serious Batman stories with very little camp and cheese. And aside from introducing the character of Harley Quinn, the show was also famous for reinventing the origin for Mr. Freeze. So famous, in fact, that this movie would go ahead and take that storyline and try to adapt it. And that amazing story that would have benefited from a bit of a darker tone just gets completely botched here when every other word out of Mr. Freeze's mouth is a pun. The character is treated just like a joke. And the movie focuses so hard on his subplot of wanting to freeze Gotham, build this big giant freeze ray that you're like, if you just spend as much time as you're doing on stealing these diamonds, creating that giant freeze ray, you might be able to save your wife, man. But with that out of the way, now we have to set up the other two villains in this film, Poison Ivy and Bane. And again, it's just such a shame that these set designs and set pieces are just used in a cartoonish manner that you can't appreciate what the film put together physically for you. But we find here that Poison Ivy has been working to try and save the planet any which way, while her neighboring research has been stealing venom from her plants to go ahead and make his own.
My super soldier serum, codenamed Venom.
Giving birth to Bane, who in this film is just nothing but muscle. I'm glad we eventually got a version of Bane that actually shows his intelligence and that he's not just someone who has big muscles, because this version of him literally just acts like a caveman with grunts here and there. Ivy, having witnessed what her neighboring research has done, decides that he needs to go ahead and silence her, killing Ivy, filling her with a bunch of her toxins and chemicals, setting up her origin as Poison Ivy. Back at the Batcave, we find Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne researching on Mr. Freeze, learning as much as they can about him, while at the same time Alfred is having to go ahead and leave the room to not show his illness. And this is where the movie starts diving in a little bit more to this Alfred subplot. Now, if you've been watching my Batman reviews, you'll notice I haven't really talked about the character of Alfred in all these previous movies, even though they've been played by the exact same actor every time. They might change Batman and the villains here and there, but Alfred, loyal man, will always be there. And that was for a reason, because he is given the spotlight in this film, which was actually a smart thing of this movie to do, since he is the only character we have been with for this long, 4 movies. Just being able to sprinkle in comedy here and there, showcasing his loyalty to Bruce Wayne. And while this film suffers from a lot of things, I feel like they do kind of nail the sentimental value he brings to this movie, with him possibly being on the edge of dying, and George Clooney's flashbacks as Bruce Wayne growing up with Alfred. If you're someone who enjoyed any of these previous Batman movies, I would think you would get kind of choked up at some of the conversations they have here.
I love you, old man.
And I love you too.
It is honestly the only good part of Batman and Robin, is just highlighting that relationship between Alfred and Bruce. Which is why I'm willing to forgive this slight change to a famous character. They do introduce Batgirl into this movie. Nowadays, most comic book fans will know that Batgirl, aka Barbara Gordon, is usually the daughter of Commissioner Gordon. But because that character didn't really have that large of a presence in these Batman films, this series thought it'd be better if they make Barbara related to Alfred. And I'm not saying the inclusion of Batgirl in this movie is bad, it just feels way overstuffed. They have too many things going on in this film now. The Mr. Freeze subplot, Poison Ivy and her evil plans, and then you have Alfred possibly dying, Robin wanting to go ahead and stand up and be his own man against Batman. She only fits in to really add that sentimental factor with Alfred, bringing up something I'm sure some people have always thought about with the Alfred character.
I'm gonna take him away from this dismal life of servitude. This whole master-servant thing, it's really ridiculous.
But with Batman and Robin now knowing that Mr. Freeze is after diamonds, they go ahead and set up a trap for him, wanting to give away some diamonds, hoping that Mr. Freeze will show up. But instead, someone a little more seductive shows up. I'm a furry now. But here's where we get the dynamic that Ivy plays into this movie of breaking up Batman and Robin.
6 million. 7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
Hey, Mr. Batman, just your credit card company here doing a fraud alert. Was it you that just spent $7 million on a night with a pink ape? I see. Okay, just checking in.
From here, all the events happening up until the finale, I wish I could say were as interesting as the movie wants it to be, because there's only like little interesting moments that happen in between that actually catch my attention. Like this whole sequence where Batman stops Robin's bike from going off, adding more to Robin just being upset and feeling like Batman doesn't trust him.
Disable engine.
Don't do this to me!
I love that. Then we get a look at Arkham Asylum here, where Mr. Freeze is being transported in a damn fridge and is put into a cell where he can't leave an icy area. That's kind of clever. But then there's things like Poison Ivy building a lair in the neon underground, or Batgirl going ahead and joining these bike races, paired up with meaningless conversations between Bruce Wayne and this love interest that has no business even being part of this movie. But hey, you get a Coolio cameo.
As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death,
Who's not even in the damn soundtrack of this movie. All basically just leading to Alfred leaving a bit of information behind to his granddaughter so that she could become Batgirl. Only downside I'll say is Joel Schumacher. The one time bat nipples on a bat suit would have really been interesting. You didn't put him on there, man. What the hell? But Robin does go ahead and bait Ivy with her kiss using...
Rubber lips are immune to your charms.
He informs his new teammates of what Freeze's plan is, where they have time for a damn costume change. I love how this woman literally became Batgirl only hours ago, and they already have built her own bat symbol, her own gadgets, even her own damn vehicle. When you have toys and merchandise to sell, ain't nothing impossible. Watching this finale go down and how much effort they put into building these sets, I just wish the storyline was better, because there's only like little tiny nuggets of the greatness or even decency Batman and Robin could have had if they just took this Mr. Freeze storyline seriously. Because the whole time he believes that Batman had killed his wife when it was actually Poison Ivy, revealing that Batman actually saved her and is willing to help Mr. Freeze continue his research and bring her back, doing the rare thing that kind of never happens in Batman movies, where at least one of the villains is redeemed, helping save the life of Alfred, while Poison Ivy, instead of dying, just ends up in prison.
Partners?
Partners.
We're going to need a bigger cave.
Like, the easy thing is always just to hate on Batman and Robin and call it absolute trash and garbage. And while I'm not going to argue against that, I will say this was still the end of something that was amazingly made, that these characters were brought to life and were the first thing a lot of people witnessed. To where, yes, Batman and Robin is way more of a commercial for merchandise and toys, but it's still responsible for creating some Batman fans, introducing villains like Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy to others, and especially to some, just being a wacky fun movie is enough for them to enjoy. There's people out there who will forever hold these films in such high regard regardless of the quality, just because of what it meant to them growing up. So whether you hate this film or love it, they have an impact on somebody out there, good or bad. Let me know what you guys thought about Batman and Robin. What did you find to love or hate about this franchise? Do you hold any fond memories of it? We can all agree they're probably not the best Batman movies, but for some reason, we've seen these movies more than other films. Can we agree on that? Anything and everything, be sure to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.